fall asleep to the entire story of William the Conqueror, the Duke who changed England forever. Medieval history. The child born into chaos. Tonight, you are not just going to sleep. You are stepping into a world without electric lights, without modern comforts, into a time of cold stone castles, flickering torches, and whispered ambition in the dark. This is the story of a boy born into chaos, a boy who was never supposed to survive, and yet would grow to conquer a kingdom. Before we begin, take a moment to gently like this video and subscribe to the channel, because here we turn history into calm, peaceful journeys designed to help you relax and drift into deep sleep. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the story begin. The night air was cold over Normandy in the year 1028. A quiet wind moved across the hills, brushing against wooden villages and stone keeps alike. Inside a modest chamber in the town of Falaise, a child was about to be born. This child would not enter a peaceful world. He would be born into uncertainty, into whispers, into a life already shadowed by judgment. His name would be William, but at first, many would call him something else, something cruel. William was not born to a queen. His father, Robert I, Duke of Normandy, was powerful, respected, and feared. But his mother, Herleva, was not of noble birth. She was the daughter of a tanner, a man who worked with animal hides, a trade considered low by the standards of the time. In the rigid hierarchy of medieval society, this mattered deeply. From the moment William was born, there were those who doubted him, those who whispered that he did not belong. And yet, his father loved him. Robert saw something in the boy, something worth protecting. The candles flickered in the room as the newborn child let out his first cry. Outside, the world remained quiet, unaware that this small, fragile life would one day reshape kingdoms. William's early years were not filled with luxury, they were filled with tension. Even as a child, he lived under a silent threat. The nobles of Normandy, powerful men with their own ambitions, watched closely. A child, especially one born outside traditional expectations, was vulnerable, and power, in those days, was never secure. When William was still very young, his father made a decision that would change everything. Robert planned a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, a dangerous journey from which many never returned. Before he left, he did something unexpected. He declared young William as his heir. This decision shocked many. Some accepted it reluctantly, others did not accept it at all. Because a child, especially one like William, was easy to challenge, easy to remove. And when Robert left Normandy, the fragile balance of power began to shift. The boy who had barely begun to understand the world was now its target. Years passed slowly, filled with uncertainty. William grew, but so did the dangers around him. Then news arrived. Robert was dead. The Duke of Normandy was gone, and a young boy, barely 8 years old, was now the ruler of a powerful and restless land. But William did not truly rule. Not yet. Instead, he became something else. A prize, a symbol, a child surrounded by guardians, many of whom would not survive. One by one, those sworn to protect him were taken away, killed in the night, betrayed by rivals, victims of a land that refused to accept a child as its master. Imagine it, a young boy waking in the darkness, hearing whispers in the corridors, knowing that danger was always near. Trust was a rare and fragile thing, and childhood, something William never truly had. Yet he endured. Through fear, through loss, through uncertainty, the boy remained, and slowly, quietly, he began to change. The soft edges of childhood hardened into something stronger, something steady, something determined. He learned to observe, to listen, to wait, because in a world like his, survival was not about strength alone. It was about patience, about knowing when to act and when to remain still. The nights in Normandy were long. Cold winds moved across the land, carrying with them the distant sounds of unrest. But inside the stone walls of his home, William would sit quietly, watching the flicker of candlelight, learning, waiting, becoming something more than what others expected him to be. The boy they doubted, the child they thought would fall, was still there, still growing, still surviving. And though he did not know it yet, the world would one day remember his name. Soft fade, slow breathing tone. In the next episode, William will begin to take control of his destiny, and the quiet child will start to become something far more powerful.
The fragile crown of a child. The nights in Normandy did not grow easier for William. If anything, they became longer, quieter, and far more dangerous. The castle walls that once seemed strong and protective now felt like silent witnesses, watching, waiting, and sometimes hiding things better left unseen. William was still just a boy, 8 years old, but the world around him had already decided something very important. He was no longer just a child. He was the Duke of Normandy, and that title came with a weight far too heavy for such small shoulders. After the death of his father, Robert, the reality of power began to reveal itself, not through grand ceremonies or golden crowns, but through whispers, soft, quiet, dangerous whispers, in the halls, in the corridors, behind doors that were never fully closed. Men who once bowed with respect now bowed with hesitation. Some did not bow at all. William noticed these things. He always noticed. His blue eyes, often calm and quiet, had begun to carry something deeper now, an awareness that most children never develop. He watched the nobles carefully, the way they spoke, the way they avoided certain topics, the way their eyes shifted when they looked at him. There was doubt, there was resentment, and in some, there was something even darker, ambition. The court of Normandy had become a place of quiet tension. Power did not rest in one place anymore. It moved, shifted, changed hands in subtle ways. Since William was too young to rule alone, guardians had been appointed, men who were supposed to protect him and guide the duchy until he came of age. But protection in those times was never guaranteed. One guardian would be loyal, another less so, and sometimes loyalty itself could disappear overnight. William learned quickly that trust was a fragile thing. One night, as the wind howled softly outside the stone walls, he sat near a small wooden table, a candle flickering gently in front of him. The flame moved slowly, bending and straightening, as if it too was uncertain, much like everything around him. Footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor outside. William did not panic. He did not call out. He simply listened. This had become a habit, listening before speaking, watching before acting, surviving before trusting. A quiet knock came at the door. Not loud, not urgent, but careful. William stood slowly, his small frame moving with surprising control, and opened the door just enough to see. A servant stood there, an older man with tired eyes. "Your Grace," the man said softly, lowering his head. William nodded, saying nothing. "The hall is ready. They are waiting for you." William understood what that meant. Another gathering, another room of men who would speak around him rather than to him. The great hall was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in feeling. Torches lined the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like silent observers. The nobles stood in groups, talking quietly, stopping when William entered, then pretending to continue. William walked forward slowly, each step steady, each movement controlled. He had learned that showing fear, even a little, could be dangerous, so he showed none. At the center of the hall stood his appointed protector, a man named Sir Alan. Sir Alan. He was one of the few William trusted, not because Sir Alan spoke kind words, but because he spoke very little, and when he did, his words were honest. "Stand beside me," Sir Alan said quietly. William did. The meeting began. Voices rose and fell, discussions about land, about control, about alliances. But underneath all of it, there was something else. A quiet question that no one wanted to ask directly. Should a child truly rule Normandy? William felt it, even if they never said it aloud. And that feeling stayed with him long after the hall emptied. That night, something changed. Not in the world around him, but inside him. He stopped waiting for safety. He stopped expecting protection. And instead, he began to understand something far more important. If he was going to survive, he would have to become stronger than anyone expected. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly, William began to adapt. He observed how power moved, how decisions were made, how fear controlled men just as much as loyalty did. He watched the knights train, listened to the advisors argue, and remembered everything, every word, every look, every silence. But danger never stayed far away. One evening, a sudden commotion broke the stillness of the castle. Shouting, running footsteps, the sharp sound of steel meeting steel. William froze for only a moment, then moved, not toward the noise, but away from it, because by now he understood something very clearly. In a world like his, survival was not about bravery, it was about awareness. Later, he would learn the truth. One of his guardians had been betrayed, killed in the night, by men who once stood beside him. No one spoke about it openly, no one explained, but everyone knew. That night, William did not sleep. He sat once again by the candle, watching the flame, thinking, not like a child, but like someone who had already carried the weight of a kingdom. Outside, the wind moved across the land of Normandy, fields, villages, stone towers, all of it waiting for a ruler who could hold it together, not just with power, but with something stronger, endurance. And in that quiet room, with a single candle lighting the darkness, a young boy began to change, slowly, silently, inevitably.
The boy who learned to survive. By now, the knights no longer frightened William, not in the way they once did. The darkness, the silence, the distant sounds of footsteps in stone corridors, these things had become familiar, almost expected. And in a strange way, that made them less terrifying, but far more dangerous. William was still only a child, but something inside him had changed. Where there was once uncertainty, there was now awareness. Where there was once fear, there was now control. He had not become fearless. No, that would come much later. But he had learned something far more important: how to live with fear. The castle was no longer just a home. It was a place of constant movement, of shifting loyalties, of quiet tension that never truly disappeared, even during the day. One morning, as pale sunlight slowly touched the stone walls, William stood in the training yard. He did not speak. He did not move much. He simply watched. Knights practiced with wooden swords, their movements strong and precise. The sound of wood striking wood echoed across the yard, controlled, rhythmic, disciplined. William observed everything: the way they stood, the way they held their balance, the way they reacted, quickly, without hesitation. It fascinated him, not because he wanted to fight, but because he wanted to understand. Sir Alan stood nearby, always nearby, never too close to interrupt, never too far to protect. "You are watching closely," Sir Alan said quietly. William did not look at him. "Yes," he replied. A simple answer, but it meant more than it sounded. Sir Alan studied the boy for a moment. "You are learning," he said. William paused, then nodded slightly. And that was true. He was learning, not from books, not from lessons, but from everything around him. Later that day, William sat alone in a small chamber. A piece of parchment rested in front of him, lines of writing, symbols, marks that represented decisions, agreements, power. He did not fully understand all of it yet, but he was trying, slowly, patiently. A servant entered quietly, placing more candles on the table. William barely looked up. His attention remained fixed on the parchment. He traced the lines with his finger, carefully, as if each mark held meaning beyond words. Outside, the world of Normandy continued to shift. Villages, lands, loyalties. Nothing stayed still for long, and William was beginning to understand something important. A ruler did not only need strength, he needed patience, observation, and the ability to wait. That night, the wind returned, soft at first, then stronger, moving across the land like a quiet warning. William stood near the window, looking out. The land stretched far into darkness. Fields, trees, distant shadows. All of it belonged to him, in name, but not yet in control. "Do you see it?" Sir Alan asked from behind him. William did not turn. "Yes," he said softly. "What do you see?" William was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Everything and nothing." Sir Alan allowed a small, almost invisible smile. That answer was not the answer of a child. Days passed, and slowly William began to take small steps, not bold ones, not reckless ones, but careful ones. He began to speak more during gatherings, not often, but when he did, people listened. At first, it surprised them. A boy speaking with calm certainty, without fear, without hesitation. Some dismissed it, some ignored it, but others, they noticed. And noticing in a place like Normandy was the beginning of change. Still, danger never left. One evening, a messenger arrived. His clothes were worn, his face tired. He carried news. A nearby lord had refused to follow William's authority. A small rebellion, quiet, but dangerous. The room grew still. Nobles exchanged glances. Some looked concerned, others almost interested. William listened. He did not react immediately. He did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. Instead, he asked one simple question: "How far?" The messenger answered, "Not far, my lord." William nodded slowly. Then he looked at Sir Alan, not as a child looks to an adult, but as a leader looks to someone he trusts. And in that moment, something shifted. Sir Alan understood. The boy was changing, becoming something more. Not yet a king, not yet a warrior, but no longer just a child. That night, William did not sit by the candle in silence. He stood, thinking, planning. The world outside was no longer something to fear. It was something to face, carefully, slowly, but surely. And somewhere, deep within him, a quiet strength continued to grow. Not loud, not visible, but steady, like a flame that refused to go out.
The first tests of leadership. The castle had grown quieter in some ways, louder in others. William had learned the rhythm of life here. The distant clang of swords, the muted footsteps of servants, the faint hum of conversation in the hallways, all blended into a background that was no longer frightening. Now they were signals. The boy had grown taller, his shoulders no longer slumped with uncertainty. His eyes, once wide with fear, now carried purpose. He was still only 9, but in many ways he was already beginning to act beyond his years. That morning, the sun barely rising, William found himself in the courtyard again. The knights were practicing drills, swords swinging with precision. Today, he was not just observing. Today, Sir Alan had allowed him a small wooden sword. "Remember, control and focus," Sir Alan said quietly. William nodded, his small fingers gripping the sword tightly. He mirrored the movements he had watched so many times before. It was not easy. His arms ached, his movements faltered, but with every swing, every step, he learned a pattern, a rhythm, a way to command his body. After the practice, William walked alone through the castle corridors. He passed the chambers of the nobles. Their eyes followed him, some with curiosity, some with quiet skepticism. But William did not falter. He had begun to understand something. Leadership was not about loudness. It was about presence. Even small gestures could command attention. Later, a message arrived from a nearby lord. A dispute had arisen over the collection of taxes. Small, yes, but potentially dangerous. William watched as adults debated heatedly. Their voices grew loud, accusations thrown, hands gesturing in frustration. He stepped forward. All eyes turned. "Calm," William said quietly but firmly. The room fell silent. It was only one word, but it carried weight. Sir Alan gave a subtle nod of approval. The nobles whispered amongst themselves. A boy commanding silence. It was unusual, but there was something in his tone, something beyond fear or inexperience. Over the following days, William observed the daily operations of the castle more closely than ever. He watched the stewards organize supplies, the knights patrol the walls, the scribes record accounts, and the cooks prepare meals. All of it mattered. He realized a ruler needed to understand every detail, no matter how small. One evening, he sat alone by candlelight, reviewing a rough map of the region. He traced rivers, hills, and neighboring settlements with his finger. He imagined possible scenarios, disputes, attacks, alliances. The map was not just paper, it was a lesson in foresight, strategy, and responsibility. As the nights grew colder, William began taking small walks along the battlements with Sir Alan. They would stop to watch distant villages, the forests beyond the hills, and the occasional patrol returning from the lands. "Observation is as important as action," Sir Alan reminded him. William nodded, silently committing it to memory. Then came the first real test. A small band of raiders had been spotted near one of the nearby villages. News traveled quickly, and a council was called. Nobles argued, knights prepared, and the boy watched, listening to each perspective. William finally spoke, suggesting a plan that was cautious but decisive. He recommended sending a small force under experienced knights while leaving the bulk of the castle's defenses in place. Some nobles raised their eyebrows. A boy giving strategy? Sir Alan quietly supported him. The plan was approved, and the raiders were intercepted successfully. That night, William reflected by candlelight. He realized leadership was not about fighting battles himself. It was about understanding, planning, observing, and knowing when to act. And he was beginning to understand it well. Little by little, the boy who had once been afraid of shadows was becoming someone who could face the darkness and lead others through it. Not yet a king, not yet a conqueror, but one step closer.
The first real challenge. The castle had grown quieter in some ways, louder in others. William had begun to understand the rhythm of life here, the clanging of swords, the muted conversations in the hallways, the distant bark of a dog, and the crackle of fires in the kitchens, all formed the backdrop to his growing awareness of responsibility. He was no longer just a boy watching the world. He was beginning to feel the weight of the world watching him. That morning, Sir Alan approached him with a serious expression. "William," he said, "today you will see your first real test." William's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. He had been preparing for this moment without realizing it. A small village under Norman protection had reported a dispute. The villagers were frightened, and tensions were rising. William listened carefully as the knights discussed strategy. His heart raced. "You will accompany us," Sir Alan said quietly. "But watch, listen, and learn. Observe carefully, and remember what you have practiced." William followed silently. He felt the weight of every eye on him, both from the soldiers and the nobles in the council. As they approached the village, William could see smoke rising from a small cluster of huts. People were shouting, children clinging to their mothers, livestock scattered across the fields. William's small hand rested on the hilt of his wooden practice sword. It was a symbolic gesture, but it helped him feel grounded. The knights moved forward with caution. William observed their every movement, noting their discipline, their coordination, their awareness of potential dangers. Sir Alan whispered instructions, and William absorbed each word. Once the situation had calmed somewhat, William noticed a small group of villagers standing aside, looking anxious. He approached slowly, kneeling slightly to meet their eyes. His voice was calm, gentle, yet authoritative. "Do not fear," he said quietly. "We are here to help. Stay close and follow the instructions of the knights." The villagers nodded, their trust tentative but growing. Over the next few hours, William continued to observe, learning how leaders assessed situations, prioritized actions, and delegated responsibilities. He noticed how fear could be mitigated by calm words, how discipline could protect people, and how patience often mattered more than force. By the time they returned to the castle, William felt both exhausted and exhilarated. He had witnessed his first challenge, one that tested not his strength, but his perception, his patience, and his understanding of human nature. That night, he sat alone by candlelight, reflecting on the day. He realized that a ruler's power did not only come from armies or wealth, but from careful observation, thoughtful decisions and the ability to inspire confidence in others, even if they were just villagers or soldiers. William's journey had only just begun. The boy who had once feared shadows and whispers was slowly becoming someone who could command respect, understand responsibility, and step closer to the role he was destined to hold.
Shadows over the castle. The early morning fog hung low over the Norman castle. William awoke to the distant sound of horn calls echoing across the hills. Sir Alan entered quietly, his expression serious. "William, today you will witness the first test of our defenses. The castle may be threatened. Observe closely and remember everything you see." William's small heart thudded with a mixture of fear and excitement. He was no longer a boy merely watching life. He was becoming part of it, part of a story larger than himself. As they reached the battlements, William could see scouts returning with urgent news. The castle had attracted attention from neighboring rivals, and a small group of invaders was advancing. Knights readied their armor, sharpened their swords, and adjusted their shields. William's eyes followed every movement, noting their discipline and coordination. Sir Alan knelt beside him, whispering, "Observe the formations, the signals, and the courage. A ruler's strength is not just in battle, but in understanding his people and their duties." William nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing on his small shoulders. The invaders appeared as tiny silhouettes against the morning mist. Yet, even distant, their presence sent a ripple of tension across the courtyard. William could see the villagers clutching their children, animals huddled in pens, and soldiers gripping weapons tightly. Sir Alan guided William to the edge of the battlements. "See how the soldiers maintain discipline? Fear must never break their formation. Learn this well." Hours passed as the castle prepared for potential assault. William observed how leaders communicated silently, how each knight had a specific role, and how trust and coordination held the fortress together. Even in the face of uncertainty, he noticed moments of kindness: a soldier handing water to a frightened villager, a young knight giving a reassuring smile to another, the quiet courage that filled the castle walls. By dusk, the invaders had retreated, deterred by the castle's readiness and the disciplined response of its defenders. William, though exhausted, felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had witnessed bravery, leadership, and responsibility, lessons far more valuable than any sword strike. That night, William sat by candlelight, reflecting on the day. He realized that leadership was a delicate balance: courage in strategy, patience and decisiveness, empathy and authority. In the shadows over the castle, a boy was slowly learning what it meant to command, protect, and inspire.
The first battle. The morning sun rose over the misty hills surrounding William's castle. The boy awoke to the clamor of distant horns, signaling that the moment he had been preparing for had arrived. Sir Alan entered quickly, his face calm but serious. "William, today you will see what it means to lead in times of danger. Watch closely and remember every detail." William's heart raced. This was no longer observation. This was real. Today, the castle's defenders would face their first true test, and he would witness courage and fear, strategy and chaos. From the battlements, William saw the advancing forces. They were larger than scouts had reported, and yet the castle's soldiers moved with disciplined precision. Sir Alan's voice cut through the tense air, giving orders, adjusting formations, and instilling confidence. William noticed every detail: the way the archers coordinated their shots, how the knights communicated with subtle hand signals, how villagers sought shelter yet helped with provisions. Each action mattered. A horn blared, and the first clash of steel echoed through the courtyard. William's eyes widened, but Sir Alan's hand rested gently on his shoulder. "Notice their courage, William. True leadership is understanding the heart of those you protect." William watched as a young soldier fell, his expression brave, his comrades rallying immediately. A moment of fear passed through William, but he reminded himself that courage often showed in the smallest gestures, offering water, a nod of reassurance, a shield raised in protection. Hours passed. The battle's intensity tested every defender's resolve. William felt a mix of fear, admiration, and deep respect. He saw that leadership was not just about issuing orders, it was about seeing the humanity in every person, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and guiding them with both authority and compassion. By late afternoon, the invaders withdrew, discouraged by the castle's steadfast defense and the careful planning executed under Sir Alan's guidance. William, exhausted but resolute, realized he had witnessed more than a battle. He had witnessed lessons in courage, patience, and responsibility that no words could teach. That night, by candlelight, William reflected quietly. The castle was safe, yet he understood that this was only the beginning. A ruler's path was filled with trials, choices, and responsibilities far heavier than he had ever imagined. He made a silent vow. He would grow strong, wise, and compassionate, learning from every moment of fear, every act of bravery, and every decision that shaped the lives around him.
William's growing influence. The first battle had left its mark. William walked along the castle corridors, listening to the soldiers' stories, observing the repairs to the walls, and noticing how the villagers had begun to trust the castle's leadership more than ever. Every detail mattered, and William's mind absorbed it all. Sir Alan entered, his face calm but serious. "William, battles teach courage, but diplomacy teaches control. Today you will see how words can be as powerful as swords." In the courtyard, envoys from a neighboring village approached. They bore no weapons, only gifts and scrolls, and their faces held a mixture of hope and caution. William stood silently as Sir Alan welcomed them, observing every gesture, every slight change in tone, every expression. The villagers watched from the sidelines, some curious, some cautious. William noticed that leadership extended beyond protection. It meant listening, understanding, and earning trust. The envoys spoke carefully. "We wish to align with your castle," one said, "to ensure safety and trade between our lands." Sir Alan nodded and asked for William's thoughts. William, feeling the weight of responsibility, stepped forward, his voice steady despite his youth. "We welcome cooperation," he said, "but only if both sides honor fairness and honesty. Safety and respect must guide every agreement." Sir Alan's eyes gleamed with approval. The envoys nodded, recognizing wisdom beyond William's years. William's heart swelled, not with pride, but with the understanding that leadership was about integrity, patience, and clarity. By evening, the envoys departed, leaving gifts and assurances. William reflected on the day. Battles taught courage, but negotiation taught balance, empathy, and foresight. The castle had survived threats outside and learned lessons inside. Sitting by candlelight, William reviewed the day's events, realizing that every choice, word, and action shaped not only the castle's future, but also the person he was becoming. He was learning that true leadership combined bravery, wisdom, and compassion, a lesson that would guide him in the challenges yet to come.
William's strategic growth. The castle had settled into a fragile peace, but William's life was far from simple. Each day brought lessons in leadership, patience, and diplomacy. The young boy was no longer merely an observer. He began to understand how decisions, small or large, could ripple through every life within the castle walls.
Sir Alan guided him with steady patience. "William," he said one morning, "a true leader must anticipate problems before they arrive. You cannot wait for events to unfold. You must think ahead, plan, and act wisely." William listened intently as Sir Alan described a new challenge. A nearby fief was struggling with internal unrest, threatening trade routes and the safety of surrounding villages. This was William's first opportunity to advise on strategy, to observe negotiation, and to see the consequences of decisions that affected not only soldiers, but civilians as well. The young boy studied maps, listened to reports, and asked questions that surprised even seasoned knights. "What are the villagers' concerns?" he asked. "How can we protect them while ensuring the castle remains strong?" By late afternoon, William was allowed to accompany Sir Alan and a small delegation to meet with the fief's leaders. He observed tense discussions, subtle shifts in expression, and the careful choice of words that could prevent conflict or ignite it. William realized that bravery was not only measured in battle, it was in maintaining composure, understanding motives, and guiding others with clarity. Returning to the castle at dusk, William reflected on the day. His chest swelled not with pride, but with the quiet recognition that leadership demanded patience, observation, and empathy. He was learning that every choice mattered. Every decision shaped the lives of those he was sworn to protect. Evening fell, and the castle lay bathed in a soft golden glow. William stood by his window, looking out over the lands he was beginning to understand. Soon, the boy who had once watched from the battlements was becoming a young leader, preparing for responsibilities that would test his courage, wisdom, and heart.
William the Conqueror's triumph. The morning mist hung low over the castle courtyard as William walked through the stone halls, now taller and more confident than the boy who had first watched battles from the battlements. Over the years, he had grown in wisdom and courage, learning from mentors, observing the lives of villagers, and understanding the delicate balance between leadership and compassion. This episode marks the culmination of his early life, the final lessons before William would step fully into the weight of responsibility that would one day make him the conqueror. Sir Alan approached, placing a reassuring hand on William's shoulder. "You have learned well, William. You have seen strategy, diplomacy, and the care required for both soldier and civilian. But the world beyond these walls will test you even more." William nodded, absorbing the words. He understood now that leadership required more than courage in battle. It required foresight, empathy, and patience. Each decision he made, every action he took, affected not only the castle, but the lives of countless people across the lands he would one day govern. The day was filled with routine yet vital tasks: inspecting the village, overseeing training exercises, and reviewing trade arrangements with visiting merchants. William noticed small improvements in the lives of villagers thanks to his careful observation and suggestions over the years. He had begun to implement systems for fair distribution of resources, ensuring safety while promoting prosperity. By late afternoon, William was called to the highest tower to watch the sunset over the hills and valleys beyond the castle walls. From this vantage point, he saw the lands he would one day lead. Each village, each field, each road was a reminder of the trust placed upon him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, William understood the weight of destiny. He was no longer just a boy learning from the world around him. He was the young leader who would one day shape history. That night, in his chamber, William sat at his desk with parchment and quill, reflecting on everything he had learned. He wrote down thoughts of strategy, leadership, and compassion, preparing himself for the challenges ahead. His journey from curious boy to capable young leader was nearly complete, but the story of William the Conqueror was only just beginning.